A flashlight slammed against the window. Then came the cold voice. Careful? Or hiding something? Huh, pal. No greeting. No reason. Just a hard stare and black skin behind the wheel. Rain falling. Car pulled over. And his hand, already flirting with the gun. But this time, he picked the wrong man. Not a civilian. Not a suspect. A federal inspector. Assigned to investigate him. And in the trunk was a termination order already signed. What state are you in? Could this happen to you? Keep watching, because tonight, justice doesn't shout. It records everything. Rain tapped like a mournful soundtrack on the empty stretch of Old Briar Road, Route 47. The black Ford Expedition EL glided quietly through the misty night, headlights casting pale beams that shimmered on the slick pavement. Inside, Colby Merritt, 52 years old, his face weathered by decades of military service, just wanted to get home. A hot cup of tea. A few minutes of silence. That's all he needed to wash away the weight of the day. But then, a siren sliced through the darkness like a blade through silk. Red and blue lights flared behind him, like claws scraping down his spine. Colby sighed, not surprised. He knew this feeling too well. The kind only black men truly understand, when police lights flash in your rearview mirror. Again, he muttered, glancing back. No speeding. Valid plates. Headlights on. But in Briarfield, North Carolina, sometimes skin color is reason enough. He pulled over. Hands to the steering wheel, 10 and 2. A ritual burned into his muscle memory. Though it had been nearly a decade since he left the military, the vigilance never left. The patrol car door slammed shut. Heavy boots struck wet asphalt. Thud, thud, deliberate and loud. A broad-shouldered figure approached. Uniform jacket pulled tight across a body built like a battering ram. The Briarfield Police badge gleamed in the streetlight. Officer Shane Kershaw, 40 years old, pale face pulled tight like freshly pressed linen. He moved like a man who believed the world was his personal stage, and tonight he had the spotlight. He tapped the window with his flashlight. Didn't smile. License and registration. No good evening. No, do you know why I stopped you? Just commands. Direct. Cold. Like a stone dropped down the back of your neck. Colby kept calm. Good evening, officer. May I ask why I was pulled over? Kershaw squinted, brow arching like he'd been insulted. You were driving too slow on this road. Looked suspicious. Colby raised an eyebrow. It was raining. Fog thick as a blanket. I was just being careful. Didn't realize caution was now grounds for being stopped. Kershaw leaned in. Voice low. Careful. Or hiding something, pal? Colby caught it, that word, pal. Not sir. Not Mr. Merritt. Just pal. The kind of word used by men who want to put you beneath them. He took a deep breath. He'd seen life-or-death moments in combat. But this was different. This was orchestrated disrespect. A cop assuming the stop would go like all the others. Intimidation, humiliation, move on. But tonight, he had no idea who he just pulled over. And the real storm, not the rain, was still on its way. The drizzle fell like mist against the windshield, weaving lines of water that crawled downward, like the weariness pressing into Colby Merritt's chest. Outside, the flashing lights of the patrol car still pulsed in the side mirror, like an anxious heartbeat thumping at the base of his neck. He didn't say another word. He just waited, in silence. His hands remained steady at 10 and 2. The hands of a man who once commanded hundreds of soldiers in combat, now trembling ever so slightly, not from fear, but from the quiet understanding of an unspoken rule in post-military life. Black skin plus nice car plus rainy night equals suspicion. Colby glanced down at the dashboard. The clock read 9:42 p.m. He should have been home by now, up in North Briarfield, where a wooden porch and a cup of sweet tea waited. Or once did. April used to sit on that porch. His wife, gone a year now, pancreatic cancer. She used to tell him, the quieter you are, the less they can touch you. He lived by that rule. Kershaw slammed the flashlight against the window again, harder this time. Colby lowered it slowly, gaze calm but unbowed. What are you doing in this area? Kershaw's tone wasn't conversation. It was interrogation. At that, Kershaw squinted. Then in one bold move, he stormed toward the rear of the vehicle, pulling a key ring from his belt. I'll inspect whatever I want, he declared. Colby knew the real game had begun. And just like any chessboard, one wrong move, and the whole thing could collapse. But what Officer Shane Kershaw didn't know was that the wrong move had already been made the moment he stepped out of his car. The sound of metal clicking echoed through the quiet night, breaking through the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the roof. Kershaw stood behind the black Ford Expedition EL, fumbling with the key ring like he'd just been handed access to a bank vault. Not a civilian trunk. Colby Merritt stepped out slowly, his black leather shoes sinking into the puddles. Rain soaked into the collar of his shirt, but he didn't flinch. Each step he took was calm, measured, as if he already knew exactly what was coming. "You're violating the law, officer," Colby said, arms crossed, voice low but ringing clear like a bell. "I'm the law out here." Kershaw shot back with a sneer, then pressed the button. Pop! The trunk opened with a loud, mechanical snap, an ominous sound that hung in the air like a warning. Inside were only a few essential items: a neatly rolled rain poncho, a first aid kit, and in the far right corner, a steel gray metal case, embossed with small recessed letters. Sentinel 4 tactical case. Kershaw squinted. "What's this?" His voice shifted from arrogant to intrigued. "Personal equipment. Not relevant to your duties," Colby replied calmly. "Yeah, well, I'm suspicious." Kershaw emphasized the word like it was some kind of all-access badge. And before Colby could say another word, Kershaw grabbed the case. "You're not authorized to touch," Colby warned, but it was too late. Click! The lid popped open, sounding like a vault unsealing a secret. And in one blink, Kershaw froze. No more smug grin. No more dominant stance. His eyes locked onto the first document inside, printed in bold, unmistakable text. Final Conduct Report, Code RZ9. Oversight Authority, State Office of Civil Oversight. Subject: Officer Shane Kershaw. Status: Immediate termination recommended. Signed by Chief Halrinslow. Kershaw went rigid. Colby stood beside him, watching every flicker of panic creep across his face. But then, a soft ping came from inside the case, a sound that wasn't part of the original contents. Kershaw flinched. He looked down. Beneath the stack of paperwork was a military-grade GPS tracking device, pulsing with a steady green light. And beside it, a compact voice recorder. Its red light blinked slowly. Recording in progress. "Oh God." Kershaw stepped back, his voice barely a whisper. You're setting me up? Setting you up?" Colby let out a short laugh, dry and sharp. "I don't need to set anyone up. You walked right into this on your own. That device, it just records the truth." Kershaw's voice cracked for the first time. Who are you?" And this time, the fear in his eyes was real. Colby stepped forward, calmly reaching out to take the case back. "I'm the one assigned to clean out the rot in this police division. And you, Shane Kershaw, you're priority number 1 on that list." Kershaw opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face turned pale as paper. His arms dropped to his sides like the weight of the case had just drained gravity from under his feet. "And one more thing," Colby added, eyes glowing with a quiet fire. The kind of fire that comes from a man who's waited a long time for this moment. That case didn't just contain the report. It transmitted the entire file to the state inspector's office. 10 minutes ago, that sentence landed like a final gunshot. Kershaw's knees buckled slightly. He gasped, panicked. No, this can't be happening. But already had. And he was the one who triggered it all. Shane Kershaw stood frozen, hands trembling as the soft green light from the Sentinel, for tracker reflected off his ghost-white face. All his earlier swagger had melted off him, dripping away like the rain on his uniform. Now, there was nothing left but raw fear rising behind his wet eyelashes. Colby Merritt closed the case. Click! The sound rang out like the shutting of a chapter or the end of an era of unchecked power. At least for one man. Kershaw stammered, still staring at the case like it was part monster, part coffin. This is real." Colby didn't answer right away. He placed the case back in the trunk, then gently shut it without locking it. A deliberate move, as if leaving the door cracked open for the truth to step out again. if needed. That report. Kershaw swallowed hard. That's real. Colby stepped closer, facing the officer directly. Under the soft, yellow haze of the street lamp, raindrops trickled from the brim of his hat like the ticking of a clock, each one counting down the end of silence. Who do you think has clearance to carry internal investigations, termination notices, and military-grade surveillance tech? Colby's voice wasn't raised, but it carried the kind of weight that made men take a step back without being told to. Kershaw blinked, lost. "Sir, Colby Merritt," he said, cutting him off. "Special federal inspector, appointed by the State Office of Civil Oversight. As of this week, I've been assigned to oversee all internal affairs operations within the Briarfield Police Division." He paused, then added, slowly, like a blade being unsheathed. "And under the directive signed April 3rd by Chief Hal Rinslow, my first assignment was to address the case of Officer Shane Kershaw." His name echoed into the night, like a funeral bell tolling for a career already buried. Kershaw gulped, his eyes bulging. No way. I haven't heard anything about any internal investigation." Colby gave a half-smile. "That's right, because men like you are never warned when the end is coming. No one else gets that privilege." Kershaw took a step back, splashing into a puddle behind him. I can explain." "Explain what?" Colby folded his arms. "Why you called a black citizen, pal? Why you pulled someone over without cause? Why you searched private property without a warrant?" Kershaw opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Nothing came out. Colby lowered his voice, but each word struck like a bullet. "You didn't know who I was, did you?" "No," Kershaw whispered. "And what if I wasn't someone you shouldn't have messed with? Would you still have done it?" Colby asked. The question hit Kershaw like a hammer to the chest. He froze, his face tightening, not from rain, but from the painful truth blooming inside him. "Look, I didn't know." Shane, Kershaw stammered. His mouth was dry, like he'd swallowed a fistful of sea salt. His hand hovered near his belt, not because he was reaching for his gun, but because he no longer knew where to place them to keep from trembling. Colby Merritt just stood there, hand behind his back, like a drill sergeant letting a rookie sit in the shame of his mistake. No need to say anything. That gaze was louder than any judgment. I'm sorry, okay?" Kershaw croaked. "I didn't know who you were. If I had—" He stopped, tripping over his own guilt. "If I had, you wouldn't have broken the law? Wouldn't have pulled me over for no reason? Wouldn't have called me pal?" Colby cut him off, voice cold as rain-soaked steel. Kershaw flushed red. "Soaked in rain. Soaked in guilt. I was following instinct. You were driving slow. It was late. It was raining. I just didn't like what you saw." Colby finished for him. A black man in a big vehicle, obeying the law, and still looked suspicious. "Right?" Kershaw swallowed hard. "I didn't mean it like that. I was wrong." "No, Kershaw." Colby took one step closer. "You weren't wrong. You acted exactly the way you've acted for years. The only difference is, tonight, you picked the wrong man." Kershaw stepped forward, nearly stumbling in the puddle. "Please, Mr. Merritt, I have a family. I need this job. I know I messed up, but I can learn. I will change. I swear." Colby looked at him, eyes narrowing in reflection. Not because the apology meant anything, but because it was far too familiar. "Change," Colby echoed, his voice ringing out like a lone echo through the woods. "How many times have you promised that to the people you've pulled over like me? How many of them didn't have a metal case to prove what really happened?" Kershaw didn't answer. His lips moved slightly, as if still weighing whether to speak or just let the tears come. Colby shook his head and sighed, not out of pity for Kershaw, but exhaustion. Exhaustion from this same old loop. "You're not sorry for what you did," Colby said quietly. "You're just sorry you got caught." No, Kershaw cut himself off, then gave up. His shoulders collapsed, as if the uniform he wore had just gained an extra 50 pounds. The air between them thickened. Only the steady whisper of rain on the car roof and wet asphalt remained. It felt surreal. A man who once strutted through Briarfield like he owned it, now soaked, shivering, like a schoolboy caught cheating during a national exam. Colby slowly stepped forward, closing the distance until there was nowhere for the eyes to hide. "Look up, Kershaw." He did. His eyes were red. Colby spoke, deliberate, unblinking. "I've seen that look before. This isn't the first time, and I'm willing to bet if tonight I had just been a regular civilian, things would have gone very differently, wouldn't they?" Kershaw didn't respond. He couldn't, because sometimes silence is the loudest confession of all. Colby Merritt stood with arms folded, facing Officer Shane Kershaw, who now resembled nothing more than a guilty student caught red-handed. Red eyes, trembling lips, rain-soaked uniform clinging to him like a second skin, no longer hiding anything. "You know what bothers me most?" Colby asked, his voice light, but sharp like a scalpel. "It's not that you stopped me, not that you call me pal, not even that you touched my property without a warrant." Kershaw stood frozen, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, as if trying to hold on to whatever shred of dignity remained. "What bothers me," Colby continued, "is that you only became afraid after finding out who I was. Which means, if I had no title, no clearance, no recording device, this would have played out like the hundreds, maybe thousands of other times. Right?" Kershaw remained silent. Colby stepped closer. "What if I were just a late-night electrician? A single father picking up his kid? An old man out getting medicine for his sick wife?" A drop, rain or sweat, ran down Kershaw's temple. At that moment, Colby said, never breaking eye contact, "You wouldn't be shaking like you are now, because back then, you'd think you were in control." Right then, a black SUV pulled up from the opposite direction. Its headlights flooded the two men standing in the rain. The door opened. A black woman stepped out, hair neatly tied, brown leather jacket, a government badge glinting under the headlights. "Julian Pace, Chief Renslow's assistant, filled me in," she said, walking briskly. "I'm Carla Vance, State Office of Civil Oversight. I'm here to verify the entire scene and ensure the protocol is properly documented." She handed Colby a thin document pouch. "Everything's ready. The report, recording copies, location confirmation. All we need is your final order." Colby nodded in thanks. He didn't even glance at the envelope. His eyes stayed locked on Kershaw, a man now stripped of all resistance. Colby turned back toward him one last time. "If you're truly sorry," he said, "start by walking away from the force on your own. Don't make anyone drag you out." Then he turned and walked away, leaving the officer standing in the rain, arms limp at his sides, like a shattered statue no one cared to fix. Colby Merritt moved slowly toward the front of the vehicle, beneath a downpour that had grown heavier. The SUV's headlights, from Carla Vance's arrival, cut through the sheet of rain, casting his silhouette like cold-forged steel. Decisive, unshakable, Officer Shane Kershaw stood just a few steps away, still frozen. His rain-drenched uniform clung to him like a second skin, but it no longer symbolized any authority. From the moment Colby exposed everything, he had ceased to be an officer. Now he was just a man who had realized he'd set off a mine beneath his own feet. Colby pulled out his phone, unlocked the screen, and tapped a familiar number. It rang once. Then a sharp, precise voice answered. "Chief Renslaw. This is Colby Merritt," he said, eyes still on Kershaw. "I've completed the on-site assessment." And Renslaw didn't need a long explanation. "Final conduct report. RZ9 has been confirmed. Shane Kershaw's behavior fully matches the internal file. Abuse of authority, protocol violations, and unprofessional conduct. We have both recorded audio and a field witness present." Renslaw paused, then asked, "You want me to sign the suspension order by morning?" "No," Colby said flatly. "I want immediate termination. No delays, no appeals, no private settlements." On the other end of the line, Renslaw's breathing hitched. Then came a slow, deliberate exhale. "Understood. Your decision takes effect immediately." Colby paused for a beat, then added firmly, "He will surrender his badge and service weapon by 7 a.m. at Briarfield Police Division HQ. I want staff to see clearly that he no longer holds any authority. And from this moment forward, Any administrative contact must go through the state-level Internal Affairs Division. Noted, Rinslow replied, his voice heavier now. Do you need me there in person? No, Colby said, still watching Kershaw. I'll tell him myself. The call ended. Colby stood still for a moment longer. His gaze locked on Officer Shane Kershaw. This was never just a traffic stop. It was part of a larger report, a chain of findings the State Office of Civil Oversight had been quietly collecting for 6 months. Findings on abuse of power, racial profiling, and procedural manipulation inside the Briarfield Police Division. And Colby Merritt, acting as Special Federal Inspector, wasn't sent here for one man. He was here to clean out a department that had already been internally warned 3 times, but never once properly investigated. Kershaw was just the first name on the list. Colby lowered the phone, slipped it into his coat pocket, then turned and walked slowly back towards Shane Kershaw. He stopped right where the headlights from both vehicles crossed, a small stage lit in the rain. Carla Vance stood to the side, saying nothing. She knew this moment belonged to Colby. Shane Kershaw, Colby began, his voice steady, echoing like a drumbeat across the wet pavement. I just spoke to Chief Rinslow. Your termination is effective immediately. Kershaw's face turned pale, his eyes wide like someone shoved off a cliff's edge. You'll surrender your badge, firearm, and credentials before 7 a.m. And no, there will be no appeal, no attorney, no reinstatement hearing. Your actions were recorded, including when you opened the back of my vehicle, after being clearly warned not to. Kershaw opened his mouth, but Colby raised a hand. My advice? Stay quiet. Last time you spoke, you called me pal, and you've seen where that got you. The line was cold, sharp, but just biting enough to make Carla chuckle softly. Colby didn't say another word. He turned, opened the SUV door, and got in, leaving Kershaw standing in the rain, a shadow stripped of rank, drenched in water, and the echoes of his own mistakes. The door hadn't fully closed. When Colby paused, his hand still gripped the handle, but his eyes turned back to where Shane Kershaw stood motionless, like a statue time had forgotten, in the glow of headlights reflecting off the wet pavement. On Old Briar Road, Colby turned. All night, he had acted with reason, with procedure, with authority, but now, only one thing remained: conscience. He walked back, his shoes tapped softly on the asphalt, each step pressing down on something the man in front of him had lost. Character. Kershaw looked up, eyes blurred. From rain or something weaker. Colby stopped just an arm's length away. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke slowly, as if each word was forged from lead. Do you know what that uniform means? Kershaw didn't answer. It's not body armor, Colby said. It's not a badge that makes one man stronger than another. And it sure as hell isn't a license to belittle people. He paused, letting the words soak into the rain for a few seconds. If one day, and I hope it never happens, someone is foolish enough to hand you another uniform, then remember this. Colby looked him straight in the eye. His voice dropped lower, but each word landed, like a hammer on a bench. It's a promise to the people, that you'll protect and serve, not threaten, not abuse. Kershaw swallowed hard, as if trying to hold something in his throat. But every excuse had long since turned to dust. Colby tilted his head slightly. His gaze softened, but his stance held firm. I didn't come here to destroy anyone, he said. I came to remind people of who they were, and ask if they're still worthy of the symbol on their chest. He turned back, opened the car door again. But before stepping in, Colby paused and finished what needed to be said. You had a choice. You just forgot. People always have to live with what they choose. From the passenger seat, Carla Vance gave a quiet nod. No words were needed. They both knew. What needed to be heard had already been spoken. Kershaw stood there, caught in the flickering beams of the two vehicles, as the rain kept pouring down on his shoulders like a sentence. He was no longer an officer, no longer an agent of justice. Only one question echoed in his head. What if I just treated him like a human being from the start? But tonight, the cost of what if was his entire career. By the time the first rays of sunlight began drying the wet roads of Briarfield the next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. What happened on Old Briar Road, what seemed like just a late-night traffic stop, had become a story the whole town couldn't ignore. Colby Merritt sat in the corner booth of Milo's rest stop Café. A black coffee steamed gently on the old wooden table. He had returned before dawn, not to celebrate, but to find the quiet he thought he'd lost. The owner, an elderly white man named Gerald, with silver hair, walked over. He glanced at Colby, then placed a slice of apple pie beside the cup. "You did something people around here have waited decades to see," Gerald said softly. "Thank you for not staying silent." Colby just nodded. He hadn't come for thanks. He came to break a cycle, one he had once been trapped in himself. Now, he had become the man who cut it off. At Briarfield Police Division, a notice was posted in the administrative hallway. Shane Kershaw, terminated. Non-appealable. Effective immediately. The younger officers read the bulletin silently. No one said a word, but in their eyes, there was a shift, a realization. A badge is not immune from consequences. A uniform can't cover up wrong forever. On social media, the State Office of Civil Oversight released a statement shared across the state. When a system audits itself and refuses to tolerate abuse, trust begins to return. Below the caption was an image pulled from the Sentinel for recording. Headlights slicing through rain. Two men in the frame, one standing firm, the other kneeling in the storm. Colby didn't speak online. He didn't need hashtags. He didn't need headlines. But those who had once been pulled over for no reason, those who never got the chance to speak up, they knew, they remembered, and they passed the story along as proof that truth may arrive late, but it never stays gone forever. Colby took a quiet sip of coffee, his eyes drifting to the cafe window. Outside, morning light slid across the awning and lit up the now dry street. He sat in stillness, thinking of all the names no one remembers, all the cases never written down. People like him, once seen as the hunted. Yesterday, the hunter fell, and today, the man who used to stay silent became the voice. Maybe the most important thing this story reminds us is this: power does not equal justice, and a badge means nothing if the heart behind it doesn't understand what it means to respect another human being. In a world where too many are dismissed for the color of their skin, their title, or their place in life, Colby Merritt didn't shout for justice. He stood still and let the truth speak for itself. His calm, his discipline, his unwavering respect for the law. That's what left the abusers with nowhere left to hide. And for each of us, if you've ever faced injustice, ever been misunderstood, ever felt like your voice was too small, then let this story be your reminder. Don't stay silent forever, because sometimes one person standing at the right moment is enough to change the entire system. If this journey meant something to you, please share this video with someone who still believes in integrity. Drop a comment below, because your story, your experience, is part of what gives this community its strength. We'll see you in the next story. There's still so much more to tell. This is Mr. 7 Stories, where justice is told from the heart.